Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're gonna skip past the raw, tragic details of the crash itself, because you likely already know them, and jump straight into the incredibly complex, high-stakes post-conviction legal maneuvering that's unfolding right now in the Mackenzie Shirilla case.
I was a driver of a tragedy, but I'm not a murderer. Mackenzie Shirilla actually gave this deeply provocative quote during a highly controversial documentary interview filmed right from behind bars. And it perfectly captures the underlying tension we're unpacking today. It highlights that massive, glaring gap between a human tragedy and strict legal definitions. She's openly acknowledging her role behind the wheel, but she's vehemently denying the actual legal definition of her conviction, which is murder.
So, you really have to ask yourself, does a convicted teenager actually have a legal leg to stand on to get out of prison? And honestly, perhaps the bigger question here is, why risk speaking publicly while actively fighting for your freedom? Legal experts pretty universally agree that advising a client to do a media interview during an active appeal is just a massive gamble. Literally anything she says in a documentary could potentially be used against her in appellate arguments or even a future trial if she somehow won her appeal.
To build our legal foundation here, just look at how incredibly fast this entire sequence of events escalated. The tragic crash happened in July 2022. By November, she's arrested. Fast forward to 2023, and the juvenile charges are bound over to adult court. This ultimately bypassed a jury entirely for a bench trial, where a judge handed down a sentence of 15 years to life.
Now you might be wondering, what was the actual smoking gun? How did a judge reach that guilty verdict? Well, the prosecution relied heavily on the car's black box data. It definitively proved the car hit 69 miles per hour, with the accelerator completely mashed down and absolutely zero braking. The defense tried to counter this by throwing out an unproven POTS diagnosis, essentially claiming she had a medical condition and must have just blacked out. But the thing is, they never actually called a medical expert at trial to prove it. Plus, her driving record showed zero prior medical issues, and toxicology revealed she wasn't highly intoxicated. All the evidence pointed to her being completely clear-headed when she hit the gas.
There's this wildly interesting moment in the documentary where she's caught on camera seemingly instructing her lawyer, fiercely emphasizing, quote, the no intent. And this wasn't just some throwaway line. It was a highly calculated strategy. It was the specific legal thread her team tried to pull all the way up to the state Supreme Court to try and unravel her conviction. Legal analysts have noted this moment felt heavily manufactured, sure, but it perfectly reveals the exact framework of her defense.
Let's clear up a bit of legal jargon real quick, because her team's very first appellate argument was that the case should never have left juvenile court to begin with. They claimed there just wasn't enough solid evidence. But under Ohio law, murder charges feature what's called a mandatory bindover. This means the state didn't actually need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt to transfer her to adult court. They only needed to show probable cause, basically just enough credible evidence that a crime was committed. It's a fundamental check and balance, and the judge found the state easily met that much lower burden.
So, her legal team launched this massive, completely uphill battle to the 8th District Court of Appeals, and they threw literally everything at the wall. They argued the bindover was wrong, they cited insufficient evidence of intent, and they challenged the admitted evidence. The result? Total failure. The appeals court swiftly dismantled and completely overruled every single assignment of error, officially affirming her conviction.
To really understand why the defense's arguments failed, we have to pull apart two distinct legal concepts that get mixed up all the time: intent versus motive. The defense argued the state relied way too much on her incredibly rocky, tumultuous relationship with Dominic Russo to prove she wanted to kill him. But here's the catch. In Ohio law, motive is not a required element of the crime. The prosecution strictly needed to prove her intent to kill, and they did exactly that through undeniable physical action: the extreme speed, the upward acceleration, and the complete lack of braking. Her defense also tried throwing out a totally different argument, claiming the conviction went against the manifest weight of the evidence. But honestly, criminal defense experts will tell you this tactic rarely works outside of clear-cut self-defense claims. Pitted against staggering circumstantial evidence like that black box data, the appeals court just shut it right down. The court made it very clear that this reversal ground is reserved for truly exceptional cases, and Shirilla's was, well, simply not one of them. Okay, which brings us to arguably their most contentious appeal of the whole shebang, the trial judge allowing what's called 404B evidence. This is a super strict legal rule that governs a defendant's prior bad acts. Normally, you absolutely cannot introduce past bad behavior just to smear someone's character. But there is a massive exception. You can use it to prove intent, or, crucially in this case, to prove the absence of a mistake.
The appeals court ruled that a very specific pattern of her recent aggressive behavior toward Russo was completely fair game to bring up. We were talking about a threat made on July 17th to crash a car on Interstate 71, specific instances of physically hitting him during a drive, pounding on his door, and even a recorded audio threat to key his car. These acts weren't admitted to just say, hey, she's a bad person. They were admitted because they happened within just 30 days of the crash, and they proved exactly how she used threats and her vehicle as weapons to exert control.
Because this was a bench trial, the judge acted as the sole decider, basically replacing a jury entirely. And this raises a really uncomfortable reality about our legal system. Unlike a sequestered jury who is kept totally in the dark about excluded, highly prejudicial evidence, a judge actually has to review that evidence just to decide if it's legally admissible. Even if the judge officially excludes it, they still know it exists. We absolutely expect judges to compartmentalize, but it brings up the messy human element. Once that bell is rung, can you really unring it? Just one single agonizing day. That is the exact margin by which the defense completely missed their strict 365-day post-conviction relief filing deadline. It was a massive procedural blunder that came down to a simple calendar calculation error regarding when the trial transcripts were officially filed. And because they missed this hard jurisdictional deadline by literally 24 hours, the trial court dismissed the petition. Just like that, an entire avenue of appeal was destroyed in the blink of an eye.
Shifting away from the sort of cold mechanics of the appeals court to the devastating emotional fallout, the victims' families have had to endure an incredibly public grieving process. Dominic's older sister, Christine, actually launched the Big Sister Unhinged podcast. She started this to actively combat the rampant online misinformation surrounding the case and to process the profound lack of remorse she saw from Shirilla. For these families, watching the documentary and all these ongoing legal maneuvers isn't just some academic exercise. It's a painful, daily reminder of a senseless loss without an ounce of perceived apology. The family's outrage over the whole documentary situation sparked a serious push to update the old 1970s Son of Sam laws. Those laws were originally designed to stop serial killers from getting rich off of book deals, but today, they're largely useless against modern digital loopholes. Now, convicted offenders can monetize their attention through TikTok clicks, YouTube, Instagram, podcasts, and crowdfunding, often hiding all that cash behind LLCs. In the modern internet age, attention itself is the ultimate currency. And this creates massive legal friction, leading to a huge debate over a proposed petition for Dom's Law. As an explainer, we really have to look at this totally objectively. On one side, victims' families desperately need protection from the horrific emotional exploitation of watching perpetrators profit from their crimes. But on the exact opposite side, defense attorneys and legal experts warn that closing these digital loopholes could catastrophically hinder innocent, wrongfully convicted individuals. Those people often rely entirely on crowdfunding to finance the massive, expensive litigation required to finally win their exoneration.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the legal ripple effect of the Mackenzie Shirilla case, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, to really ponder. How do we build a justice system that protects the peace of mind of victims' families without stripping away the very digital tools that might one day free an innocent person? If anything, this case proves that a verdict isn't the end of the story. It's often just the beginning of a relentless, highly technical, and deeply emotional legal war. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the systems around us.